I didn't expect that morning to change anything. I was just trying to get through it like every other day back then, counting minutes, counting dollars, counting how much strength I had left before something inside me finally cracked. I remember standing on that crowded train platform, coffee gone cold in my hand, shoes worn thin at the heel, thinking how invisible I felt in a city that moved fast and didn't care who got left behind. People brushed past me like I was furniture. No eye contact, no pause, just noise, metal breath, and impatience. And yeah, I was used to that. When you grow up, being underestimated, ignored, talked over, you learn to shrink. You learn to survive quietly. The train arrived with that familiar screech doors sliding open, bodies packing in. I grabbed a pole, wedged between a guy in a suit barking into his phone and a woman scrolling like her life depended on it. My feet already hurt. I'd been up since before sunrise, working a shift most people don't even notice exists. And then I saw him. An older man, late 70s maybe, stepping in slow, uncertain, wearing a clean coat but with hands that shook just enough to make me nervous. He reached for a strap, missed, stumbled. Nobody moved. Not one person. I felt that familiar battle start inside me. Part of me said, not today. You're tired. You don't owe anyone anything. The other part, the one that never shut up, said, you know how this ends if he falls. I gave up my seat, just stood up and said, here, take it. He looked surprised, almost embarrassed. You don't have to, he said. I smiled and lied, said I was getting off soon. I wasn't. Yeah, that happened. I stood there, the rest of the ride legs shaking, pretending it was no big deal. To me, it wasn't heroism, it was reflex. Do the right thing. Keep moving. That's how I'd been raised. I didn't know that man. I didn't know what he owned, who he was, or what kind of power he carried. All I knew was he looked tired, and I knew that feeling in my bones. I got off at my stop and forgot about him almost immediately, because when you're barely holding your life together, you don't have the luxury of reflecting on small moments. You just go. The rest of my day went how they usually did back then. Lectures, I tried to stay awake through numbers that never quite worked out in my head, reminders of how far behind I felt compared to everyone else. I worked another shift that night, smiled through comments that cut a little too deep, nodded while people talked to me like I was disposable. That's the thing about being underestimated. People don't even realize they're doing it. They talk slower, they explain things you already know, they assume your dreams are smaller than theirs, and you let them because correcting them takes energy you don't have. I went home, exhausted, checked my bank balance, felt that familiar drop in my stomach, and told myself I'd figure it out. I always did. Or at least I kept going until something gave. That night I fell asleep thinking about nothing and everything at once. 3 weeks later, a letter showed up. Thick envelope. Official looking. My name printed clean on the front. I almost threw it aside. Mail like that usually meant bad news. Fees, warnings, deadlines I couldn't meet. But something made me open it. Inside was a scholarship notification. Full coverage, tuition, books, monthly support. I read it once then, again, then a third time, convinced I was misunderstanding something. My hands started shaking. I sat down right there on the floor because my knees gave out. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I got angry. Because relief does that to you when you've been surviving too long. At the bottom was a line about an anonymous donor. No name, no explanation. Just opportunity. And immediately I thought of the train, of that old man. My chest tightened. I Googled. I connected dots I hadn't even realized were there. And suddenly it all felt complicated. Gratitude mixed with pride, shame, suspicion. I didn't want to be someone's charity case. I didn't want help that came from pity. I'd worked too hard, been through too much to be reduced to a feel-good story for someone else. So I waited. And when I saw him again on that same train line, same time, I didn't hesitate. I walked straight up to him and said, "We need to talk." He looked startled, then calm like he'd been expecting this. We stood there, train swaying people around us completely unaware that two lives were about to collide again. I asked him if it was him, the scholarship. He nodded. I told him he had no right, that he didn't know me, that I didn't ask to be saved. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. He listened, really listened. When I finished, he said something I wasn't ready for. He said I didn't do it because I think you're weak. I did it because you reminded me of who I used to be and who I forgot. He told me about growing up with nothing, about working jobs that broke his body, about watching people pass him by like he didn't matter, about how success didn't erase that feeling, it just buried it. He said giving you that seat wasn't small. It cracked something open in him, made him realize how far he'd drifted, and then he said, "You earned this, not by standing on that train but by everything you've done to get here." I didn't forgive him right away. I didn't suddenly feel okay. Pride doesn't dissolve that easily, but I accepted the scholarship, because refusing it wouldn't prove strength. It would just make my life harder for no reason, and maybe that was the first real victory. Learning that accepting help isn't losing, it's choosing to keep going. Everything changed after that slowly at first. I slept more than 4 hours for the first time in years. I cut my work hours, I ate real meals, I studied without that constant clock ticking in my head. The fog lifted, and here's the part people don't talk about enough. Opportunity doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've been fighting to become. I didn't suddenly relax. I worked harder, with focus, with purpose. Because now, failure wasn't just about me anymore. It was about proving that belief, when placed in the right hands, actually matters. I saw him a few more times. We talked. Not about money, but about choices. About regret. About the quiet damage done by thinking success means never looking back. One day, he told me he was rebuilding his foundation, putting people like me in decision-making roles. People who knew what struggle actually looked like. I laughed and said, "About time." He smiled and said, "Yeah, that happened." Years passed. I graduated. Then another graduation. Then another. I built a life I'd once only allowed myself to imagine in secret. And the thing is, I didn't forget where I came from. I couldn't. It was in my bones. In the way I spoke to people. In the way I noticed who wasn't being noticed. In the way I refused to let success turn me blind. The last time I saw him was in a quiet room, sunlight cutting across the floor. He looked smaller, older, but lighter somehow. He thanked me, not for the seat, but for the reminder. I told him he'd done something that would outlive both of us. He smiled and said that was the point. After he passed, people said all kinds of things about him. Powerful, complicated, generous, late to change. All of it was true. But the part that mattered most to me was this. He listened when someone the world overlooked stood up and spoke. He chose to change instead of defend himself, and that choice echoed. Now, when I take the train, I still watch people. I see the tired ones, the ignored ones. Sometimes I stand, sometimes I speak up, and sometimes I just sit there and remember how close I came to burning out quietly, how easy it would have been to disappear into statistics no one reads. So, here's why I'm telling you this. Not because it's inspirational, not because it ties up neatly, but because it's uncomfortable, because it forces questions. Was it right for him to step in? Was it right for me to accept? Where does help become control? Where does pride become self-sabotage? And how many people do we walk past every day because we've decided their struggle isn't our problem? I want to know what you think. Was he wrong to intervene even with good intentions? Would you have taken the help or turned it down to protect your pride? And have you ever underestimated someone or been underestimated yourself without even realizing the damage it did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Argue with each other if you need to. These conversations matter more than we admit. And sometimes all it takes to change a life is standing up when no one else will.